You never think it'll happen to you. You never think the person you'd die for could look you in the eyes and betray everything you built together. But trust me, it can. And it did. Hi, I'm John, and for the longest time I thought I had it all figured out. I had a beautiful wife, Grace, who I loved with every part of me. I was the guy who stayed late at work to provide for us, who picked up flowers on the way home, and who never forgot an anniversary. Ours wasn't just a marriage, it was my purpose. Or so I thought. Grace and I met in college. We clicked instantly, and it wasn't long before we started building our life together. We bought a cozy house in the suburbs, the kind with a white picket fence and a garden she loved to tend. Weekends were spent hosting barbecues with friends or binge-watching our favorite shows on the couch. From the outside looking in, we were the couple people envied, the kind people whispered about at parties, saying, "Now that's love." But even perfect pictures can have cracks if you look closely enough. Over time, I started noticing little things. She wasn't as present during our conversations. Her phone, once a shared tool, became something she guarded like a secret. And there were nights when she'd stay out late, claiming it was just dinner with friends. I told myself not to overthink it. Every marriage has its rough patches, right? That's what I believed. I buried those doubts deep down, thinking that love was enough to weather any storm. But I was wrong. What I didn't know back then was that Grace had already started tearing apart the life we'd built. And soon, I'd have to make a choice. Hold on to the illusion or face the truth head-on. Looking back, the signs were there, but I chose to ignore them at first. Grace had always been outgoing, but something changed. She started going out more often, saying she was meeting friends and even a weekend getaway, which she claimed was with the girls. It didn't seem like a big deal at first. She deserved time to herself. But then it started happening regularly. And when I'd ask who she was meeting, her answers felt rehearsed, like she was telling me what she thought I wanted to hear. Then there were the credit card statements. I've always been the one to manage our finances, so it was impossible not to notice unusual charges. Restaurant bills at places we'd never been together. Boutique shops I'd never heard her mention before. I asked her once casually, "What's this charge at the Rosewood Grill?" She smiled, waved it off, and said it was lunch with a friend from way back. I believed her, at least I wanted to, but what bothered me most was the shift in how she acted around me. Grace used to laugh at my dumb jokes, ask about my day, and cuddle on the couch during movie nights. Those little things faded. She became distant, like her body was there, but her mind was somewhere else. Conversations felt forced, and she'd get defensive over the smallest things, like when I asked why she started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. "It's nothing," she'd say, with a sharpness that made me stop asking. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe she was stressed from life or just needed some space. But sometimes I wonder why it felt like my wife was slipping away from me. A part of me didn't want to admit it, but deep down I felt something was wrong. And that uneasy feeling? It was just the beginning. It all started with a simple mistake. One evening, Grace left a tab with her email open on our shared laptop. At first, I didn't think much of it. We often used the same computer for convenience, and it wasn't unusual for her to forget to log out. I sat down intending to check something online, but before I could, a string of unread emails caught my attention. They weren't addressed to me. Curiosity got the better of me. The first thing I noticed was a receipt. It was for a necklace, a silver chain with an engraved heart. Not for me. The delivery address wasn't ours either. I didn't recognize it. Confused, I scrolled down. There were more receipts. Dinners at expensive restaurants I had never been to, surprise gifts, and even bookings for a 5-star hotel in the city. I opened one of the hotel confirmations, my hands shaking as I clicked. It was explicit. 2 guests, 1 king bed, champagne on arrival. Paid for with our joint account. First came disbelief. Could this really be happening? The woman I had loved, trusted, and shared everything could be doing this to me. Then came the rage. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand answers, an explanation, anything to make this make sense. But as quickly as the anger came, it was replaced by heartbreak. I felt hollow. Despite the storm of emotions raging inside me, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. Confrontation might give her the chance to twist the truth, to deny what I had seen, or to manipulate the situation. I needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence that would leave no room for her excuses. So, I closed the laptop. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was replaying every moment of our marriage and trying to understand where it had all gone wrong. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: Grace had underestimated me. If I wanted to end this marriage on my terms, I needed to be smart and strategic, not emotional. In the days that followed, I spent hours going through her emails and our bank statements, every keystroke making my heart sink deeper into my chest. I started by printing out everything: the emails, receipts, and credit card transactions. I created a folder and organized the evidence meticulously. Every printout felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. It hurt, but I knew it was necessary. Still, I needed more. I couldn't rely solely on emails and receipts. I wanted undeniable, inarguable proof of her infidelity. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. It wasn't an easy choice. Those services are expensive, but I justified it as an investment in my future. Within days, he provided me with photos of Grace and her lover together at his place, laughing, holding hands, even kissing. There was no way she could deny it now. As I gathered this evidence, something inside me changed. I stopped thinking of Grace as the woman I once loved and started seeing her as an obstacle I needed to remove from my life. Every step I took wasn't about revenge, it was about freedom. And through it all, I never let Grace suspect a thing. I acted as if everything was fine, smiling when I needed to and going about our daily routines like nothing had changed. If she ever noticed that I was quieter than usual, she didn't say anything. Maybe she thought she had me fooled. Maybe she didn't care. Either way, it worked in my favor. She didn't know it yet, but her betrayal was about to cost her everything. I remember the day like it was yesterday. The kind of evening where couples stroll hand in hand, lost in their own little worlds. But my world was already shattered. I waited outside the restaurant where Grace had told me she was meeting a friend. I knew the truth. My private investigator had given me the details: the time, the place, and even a photo of the man she was meeting. He wasn't just anyone. He was younger, well-dressed, with a confident grin that screamed arrogance. Knowing was one thing, but seeing it for myself, that was a different kind of pain. I parked my car a block away, walked toward the restaurant, and settled into a quiet spot across the street. I could see through the large glass windows. There she was, my wife of 15 years, sitting across from him, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. It felt like watching a stranger, someone I didn't know but had once loved with everything I had. The restaurant was warm and lively, filled with laughter and the soft clinking of wine glasses. But for me, it felt cold. I was a spectator in a scene I never wanted to be a part of. My mind raced with questions. Was I not enough? When did this begin? How could she sit there, laughing, while our life together meant so little? Time seemed to stretch as they lingered over their meal, completely oblivious to what was happening around them. I watched as he leaned in closer, whispering something that made her throw her head back in laughter. Finally, they stood up. She grabbed her purse, and he reached out, placing his hand lightly on her back as they walked toward the exit. It was then that I knew this was my moment. I crossed the street, keeping my pace steady, my eyes locked on them. They stepped out onto the sidewalk, still in their little bubble, completely unaware of me until I was just a few feet away. Grace's laughter faded the moment she saw me. Her face paled, her smile vanished, and her eyes widened in shock. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope I had been carrying for days. Handing it to her, I said in a voice as calm as I could manage, "You'll need these." Her hands trembled as she took the papers. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her lover, standing awkwardly beside her, looked like he wanted to disappear. He glanced between us, his confidence now replaced with unease. I didn't wait for her to explain or for him to say anything. I turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind me, I heard Grace call my name, her voice shaky and unsure, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. As I reached my car and drove away, the surrealness of it all began to sink in. That was the last time I saw Grace as my wife. That night marked the end of a chapter one had thought would last forever. When the divorce process began, I knew I couldn't rely on emotions alone. I had to rely on facts. I walked into that courtroom armed with evidence, not just accusations. Every piece of paper, every transaction, every photo I'd collected was my armor. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth and making sure I didn't walk away empty-handed after everything I'd been through. The first thing I presented to the court was a series of evidence about how Grace used our money to fund her affair. Grace had been booking expensive hotel rooms and buying him gifts, designer watches, and meals at high-end restaurants, all on our joint account. I printed every single transaction, proving that she was funding their affair using marital funds. Then I introduced the report from the private investigator I had hired. It was damning. The PI had documented their meetings with timestamps and locations. There were clear photos of them walking into hotels, holding hands, and kissing in public. It wasn't just speculation anymore. It was proof, undeniable and clear. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the judge and laid it all out. I explained how I had been a devoted husband, working hard to provide for our family while Grace betrayed me behind my back. I described the emotional toll, but more importantly, I highlighted the financial exploitation. I showed how her actions not only broke our marriage, but also drained the resources we had built together. The judge listened intently as I detailed how Grace's affair violated not just my trust, but the foundation of everything we had built as a couple. Grace's lawyer tried to downplay it, of course. They claimed it was a mistake and that it shouldn't affect the division of assets. But the evidence spoke louder than any excuses they could make. The receipts, the emails, and the PI's photos made it impossible for them to argue against the truth. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The house was awarded to me, as it was clear I had been the one maintaining it financially while Grace was off spending on someone else. Most of our shared assets were divided in a way that reflected what I had contributed to the marriage. Grace was left with minimal spousal support, just enough to cover her basic needs for a short period, not the comfortable lifestyle she'd been enjoying while deceiving me. When the gavel came down, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it gave me a chance to move forward without the burden of her lies dragging me down. I remember the day the divorce was finalized like it was yesterday. The courtroom felt cold and distant, even though the outcome was in my favor. Grace sat across the room, barely meeting my gaze, her face pale and drawn. As the judge's gavel struck, marking the end of our marriage, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of finality. Our chapter was officially closed, and it was time for me to begin writing a new one. That evening, I returned to the house, the home we once built together. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a hollow shell of memories. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of what once was: the family photos on the mantel, the couch where we used to sit and talk about our future, the dining table where we shared countless meals. I knew staying there would only anchor me to the past, and I couldn't heal if I stayed tethered to that pain. I packed my belongings methodically. No rush, no hesitation, just a calm determination to move forward. I filled box after box, carefully sorting through my things. Each item I chose to keep felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a reminder of who I was before the betrayal. The rest? I left it behind. They were relics of a life that no longer belonged to me. The house went up for sale the very next day. I didn't want to linger. I didn't want to second-guess my decision. A part of me had hoped Grace would want to keep it, but she didn't. She couldn't afford to, not after the settlement. So I let it go both literally and figuratively. I changed my phone number the same week. I didn't want any chance of Grace calling me, or worse, showing up with some flimsy excuse to reconcile. I needed to cut off every link to her. Then came the harder part, deleting my social media accounts. I'd been connected to so many people through those platforms, but I knew that staying connected would mean staying reachable, and I didn't want to be found. I wasn't running away. I was starting over. Moving to a new city wasn't just a decision, it was a necessity. I chose a place where no one knew me, where I wouldn't be John, the guy whose wife cheated on him. It was a fresh slate, a chance to rebuild without the shadow of my past hanging over me. The first few weeks were quiet and lonely, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. There were no reminders of Grace, no familiar faces asking how I was doing or offering hollow pity. It was just me figuring out who I wanted to be. Cutting off all ties to Grace wasn't easy, but it was the only way I could move forward. I didn't hate her, not anymore. I didn't even think about revenge or regret. I just knew that to heal, I had to leave her and everything we had behind. The life we built together was gone, and I had to accept that. Starting over was my way of finding peace, of finding myself again.